Hey guys, Savage Joy here with Real Progressives. I am in Lancaster, Pennsylvania, and I am seeing Bernie for the 7th time because apparently I'm a grumpy grandpa groupie at this point. So Bernie is here because he is endorsing a candidate named Jess King, who is running in this Pennsylvania area. So he's coming here to endorse. This is actually his second out of third stop within 24 hours. And addition to that, he also did a forum yesterday with some people in criminal justice. So within 24 hours, he's doing 3 things in 3 cities plus a panel. So fuck the ages bullshit. But anyway, they are getting ready to start. So I'm going to leave you guys to it. Thank you for watching, and thank you for commenting, and you guys kick ass. Oh, I'm already having fun, Michelle. Anytime Bernie is involved with anything, I have fun. Played at their name is Vinegar Constituency, and interesting thing is my husband used to play in a band with some of them, and he is the singer is the cousin of our best man. So it was cool to see them. Last time I saw them, they played Psycho Killer, but they play with banjos and stuff, so they're pretty badass. When I went up to talk to them, I requested it again, and the one guy said, well, that's not very political, and I said, well, have you heard of Hillary Clinton? It's a beautiful day. But interestingly enough, we had about an hour drive. It wasn't too bad. But typically we end up going about 6 hours early. I'm waiting in line.
Good morning, everyone, and welcome. I have a question. Who's excited to hear Bernie? And who's excited to finally have a candidate like Jess King to vote for? Finally, someone willing to forego corporate bribes and serve the people. Well, it is such an honor to be here. My name is Ashton Clatterbuck, and I am a junior at Lancaster Mennonite High School. Honestly, when the Jess King campaign reached out and asked me to speak, I was in complete disbelief. Like, sorry, you must have the wrong number. I just could not comprehend that I had the opportunity to introduce my biggest idol. Bernie Sanders has inspired the youth of this nation to stand up and defend what we hold sacred and to act passionately on passionately held values that many of us here share. I have been involved with Lancaster Against Pipelines for the past 4 years. Lancaster Against Pipelines, or LAP, is a grassroots movement committed to protecting the people of Pennsylvania from the horrors of fracking and to resist a gas industry that has become much too powerful. I wasn't overly interested in politics or social justice for a majority of my life. After all, when all this pipeline stuff began, I was only 12 years old. But then a gas industry contractor knocked on my front door to tell us that a pipeline was going through our backyard. How is it that we can be so completely oblivious to the atrocities happening around us until we find them on our doorstep, sometimes quite literally? During his campaign speech at Millersville University 2 years ago, Bernie Sanders publicly stated his opposition to the Atlantic Sunrise Pipeline, saying, quote, "I am proud to join a grassroots coalition of local residents, business owners, farmers, and religious leaders in strong opposition to the Atlantic Sunrise Pipeline."
Yeah!
Bernie's bold support for Lancaster was striking in contrast to the deafening silence of our own local and state officials who, for the past 4 years, have been too cowardly to defend the people who they were elected to represent.
Yes!
Thankfully, all of this is about to change thanks to future Congresswoman Jess King. For those of you who have not been following the pipeline fight, there's a group of Catholic sisters called the Adores of the Blood of Christ, living in Columbia, who have farmland along the pipeline route. Last summer, the sisters invited Lancaster Against Pipelines to come construct an outdoor chapel of resistance in the pipeline right-of-way, which happens to run directly through a cornfield that the Adores have been farming for the past century. Last October, the first earth-moving equipment arrived at the sisters' property. 23 community members, including myself, were arrested while blocking the equipment from entering the cornfield where the chapel stands.
Guys, I apologize. I am going to move up, and it might be
There
kind
was
of
one
lopsided, but
and
this
only
isn't
one
close enough
political
for you
candidate
guys,
who
so
stood
I'm
with
gonna
us,
move up.
locking arms with the protesters, singing and praying songs with us, unafraid to face off against giant earth-destroying machines. Jess King. She cheered us on as police cars loaded us up and took us away. That is a true representative of the people, bold and courageous enough to stand up to a $50 billion corporation because she does not accept bribe money from the fossil fuel industry. My involvement with the Atlantic Sunrise Pipeline prompted my interest in traveling to Standing Rock, where Native communities were resisting the Dakota Access Pipeline. After a full 24 hours of nonstop begging, there was no option but for my dad to drive both of us out to join the fight in North Dakota. While there, I took part in actions where we were faced with pepper spray, attack dogs, and hostile law enforcement. This was an eye-opening moment for me. The police force, whose goal is to keep the public safe, was acting as private security for the oil industry as they rampaged tribal land. This has to change. Most recently, I have been working with a group of students representing 9 schools across the county to push for gun safety legislation. 2 weeks ago, I and a dedicated core group of student leaders, to whom I am very grateful, organized a sit-in at Lloyd Smucker's office. Lloyd Smucker? Have any of you seen him, by the way? Where is he? I haven't seen him. This is an elected official who accepts nearly $250,000 from the NRA annually. And yet he claims this money doesn't influence the decisions he makes. Being connected with this national Never Again movement has made me more hopeful than ever. Students of all ages are coming together and determinedly saying no. We will take no more of this. Never again. again will we allow school children to be slain at their desks. Never again. Say it with me. Never again. Never again will we allow singing worshipers to have their voices silenced by bullets. Never again. Never again should concertgoers have to distinguish which are the sounds of the drum kit and which are gunfire. Never again. After years of investing more time in community organizing than doing my math homework, sorry, Mr. Boer. He's here, by the way, today. I didn't know that when I wrote this. I have come to realize that change is possible, but only if enough people are willing to work for it. There have been influential youth at the forefront of every movement. Without them, progress would never be made because a movement needs the inspiration and energy that they bring. So I challenge every young person in the crowd today to step it up. If we all invest just 5 hours a week to an issue that we care about deeply, we could all change the world drastically. And to first-time voters out there, do not vote based solely on party lines, but instead on your values. And vote for candidates who have our best interests in mind. Just kidding. So, even though the pipeline is currently being put in the ground, it is still wrong, and we are still going to fight, because that is what citizens are supposed to do. They're supposed to defend the land and supposed to create a democracy that is available for everyone. Next Saturday, the 12th, Lancaster Against Pipelines is holding a fun, creative action. And if you are interested in participating, there is more information on LAP's Facebook page and website. This fight is not over, and we will not back down. So there are a few more speakers left, so I will invite Claudia up next. She is a dreamer and community leader for immigrant rights right here in Lancaster. Thank you.
Some of you guys may have seen the protest I was at 2 weeks ago. We were protesting Governor Wolf because he has not listened to people's pleas about those pipelines.
Hi everyone. I'm very happy to be here today. It is such an honor to share the stage for the future Congresswoman for the 11th District of Pennsylvania. While I have the mic today, I'm going to tell you a little bit about myself and explain why I support the amazing Jess King. My name is Claudia Llewellyn, and I am a proud Lancasterian. Earlier this week, I was looking at a Facebook post about this event and it had me listed as a speaker. On the post, it described me as a political activist. I thought that was pretty wild, since it was only a few years ago. I wasn't even sure what the difference between Democrats and Republicans were. That all changed in 2016. My husband, who was my boyfriend at the time, wouldn't shut up about a guy whose name is Bernie. Many nights while I was trying to sleep, my boyfriend will be watching all YouTube videos of Bernie giving speeches on the Senate floor, and it will keep me up. After I watched a few of those YouTube speeches, I too was hooked. It wasn't long until I was making buttons for Bernie, going to all his rallies in driving distance, and knocking on strangers' doors to tell them about this politician who believes in crazy stuff like dignity for everyone and using similar systems that have and are already working in many other countries. Thanks in part to Bernie and his ideas, I really am a political activist now. And as an activist for immigrant rights, I feel like I have a unique perspective on the choice we have in PA 11 in November. I have spent the past few years asking every politician that I could where they stand on different immigration issues. I am a DACA recipient or a dreamer. Legislation that could be passed in the coming years will dramatically change my life. At a forum of Democratic candidates, I asked the participants if they will support a DREAM Act. Jess spoke eloquently about the need to pass the DREAM Act and to be thoughtful in protecting the human dignity of all immigrants. Yes. Her powerful words have stuck with me ever since. Our community in Lancaster has held probably a dozen rallies and public meetings to show support for immigrants when the Trump administration attacked us. I have seen yes at 7 or 8 of those events, including ones from well before she announced her candidacy. So she was not there to campaign, but rather to stand in solidarity with immigrants. Her deeply held beliefs in treating everyone with dignity and her conviction that this country is for all of us come shining through in those moments. And then there's Jess' opponent. I had the privilege of meeting this district's current representative too. A large organization was able to help Dreamers get meetings with members of Congress to talk with them about our lives and experiences. This was a really big moment for me. It was the first time I will get to speak with Smucker after dozens of failed attempts. He's not crazy about taking time with his constituents. Anyway, I got to meet with him. I told him all about my story, growing up in Florida, being taken advantage of by dirty employers, what is it like to learn English and to adapt to American culture. I told him about moving to Lancaster and how much my husband and I love this community. When I mentioned my husband, the representative asked, "Is your husband an immigrant as well?" When I said no, my husband is an American. The Congressman reached gently and touched my shoulder, and he said to me, "You are an American too, even if it doesn't say so in a piece of paper." That felt like such a special moment for me. At that second, I felt like all of the organizing I had been doing was worth it. He got it. He really understood who I am and that I belong here with my family and my friends. When I left that meeting, I felt like I had found a new ally. It was less than 2 weeks later that the government was shut down for a weekend. The congressman used that event as an excuse to do a webcast attacking Dreamers. He viciously called me and the other 800,000 Dreamers illegals. So in 2 weeks, in Smucker's eyes, I had gone from being an American to being nothing but a crime. Calling people illegals is a nasty thing to do. It gives others permission to not feel bad when neighbors are ripped away from their children and kept in inhumane conditions. Nobody should be using that term.
Yes.
Especially not an official that was elected to represent a welcoming community like Lancaster. Maybe deep down, the congressman thinks I am an American without a piece of paper. Or maybe he views my existence as a crime. It doesn't matter to me which one he really thinks. He showed me everything I need to know about him. PA 11 has two choices in November. The difference between them are more than their views on immigration. They also have big difference in the quality of their character. One of the choices is a coward and a liar. The other cannot help but to show her integrity, empathy, and authenticity. Jess has shown me through both her words and her actions that she believes in moving forward together as a community. I am forever thankful for Bernie getting me into politics and showing me that a brighter future is possible. I am excited to stand with Jess, who shares a very similar vision. I am not able to vote in the election, but I will do everything in my power to spread the word about Jess. I hope enough people see that we deserve a better leader than Lloyd. We deserve someone like Jess to lead us and to represent us. ¡Que viva Jess! Thank you. Up next, we have Allison Troy, a professor, mother, and volunteer leader in the Yes King for Congress campaign. Let's welcome Allison.
Hello. Hi, my name is Allison Troy. I'm very nervous. I'm a volunteer leader in the Jess King campaign, and it sounds really weird to stand up here in front of you and say those words about myself. That's very new for me. I'm still getting used to it. If you had told me a year ago that I would stand on a stage in front of this many people and use the word leader to describe myself, I would not have believed what you're saying. So I'm going to tell you my story today of how I got involved as a volunteer and how I came to be a leader in the Jess campaign. And one of the morals of the story that I'm going to tell you is that a whole lot can change in a very, very short amount of time. I'm a working mother. I have a beautiful 3-year-old daughter and a wonderful husband, Elliot. They're both here today. Hello. We live just up the road in Mannheim Township. And I grew up just a few hours south of here in suburban Maryland. I lived a very comfortable, kind of stereotypical suburban middle-class life as a child. I did not have to worry about a lot of things growing up. And I say that because my own mother did not have the same kind of life at all. Just one generation before mine, my mom was raised in poverty, deep poverty. She was often hungry for days at a time because their refrigerator was empty. Their roof leaked every time it rained, and they lived in rural Oregon, so this was a lot that it rained. My mom suffered through a lot of hardship in her childhood. Her whole family did. It wasn't an easy life. But my mom's story has a happy ending because she was able to pull herself up into the middle class, out of poverty and into the middle class. And the reasons that she was able to do that was that first, she worked hard, but that wasn't all. My mom also had opportunities available to her from our government. She was able to, yes, opportunity from our government. It's a great thing. My mom qualified for financial aid that helped cover the cost of tuition to attend the University of Oregon. And after graduating, she was able to qualify for low interest student loans that were subsidized by our government. That meant that she could go to law school without incurring a lifetime of crippling debt. And because of that, she became a lawyer and worked a long and successful career that was able to pay for that cushy middle-class life that I and my brothers enjoyed. My mom's story is a happy one, right? Unfortunately, it's a rare one. I know there are a lot of families that start like my mom. They have a story that starts like my mom's story and it doesn't end like it. right? My mom's stories are actually much, much too rare. But because my mom raised me, she instilled in me a really, really deep value in the idea of opportunity and the idea that our government can be an engine of opportunity for the people who need it. My mom raised me to believe in the idea that our government should lift us up, should be an engine of equality and of fairness. And as an adult, I've been forced to realize for many, many years now that the people who say they represent me in Washington don't seem to share any of those same values at all. And that's been really disappointing for me. I've had to live with a lot of disappointment and anger towards my elected representatives. And the way that I used to cope with that disappointment was by doing two things. I would vote every 4 years, and I would complain. And that's all I did. It seemed like enough, actually, before. And then everything changed. The elections of 2016 happened. And yeah, boo. It was terrible, right? But here's the good thing about what happened in 2016. For the first time in my life, I was jolted awake. And I've been awake ever since. I realized very, very clearly on November 9th, 2016, that if I am living in a country with a government that is so far away from my personal values, that I need to show up and get to work. So I knew I wanted to get involved. I knew I wanted to do something. I didn't know what it was. I had no idea even if I was capable of being helpful at all. But I knew if I wanted to look my daughter in the eye when she's grown and tell her that I wanted to be able to tell her that I had done everything I possibly could to build her the future that she deserves. So I heard about Jess's vision for the future. You're going to hear from her herself in a few minutes. And I was really inspired by her vision of this inclusive future, an America for all of us. And so I knew I wanted to do everything in my own personal power to send her to Washington. So I didn't know what to do at all to get involved. So I came up with a very simple two-step strategy that I've been following for the past 8 months. And the 2 steps are show up to stuff. And the second step is to say yes to stuff. Show up, say yes. It's all I've been doing. It's actually quite simple. So I showed up at Jess's office and I asked what they needed help with. And they said what they really needed help with in the fall was canvassing, knocking doors, getting out there and spreading the word about Jess. And I said, at first, this was my first time in their office, no thank you. That sounds terrible. I'm really scared to do that. Knocking on doors and talking to strangers, I don't want to do that. But they said that would be what helps Jess win. The talking to each other and connecting to each other. That's how we get Jess to Washington. So I said, okay, fine. I will go. I'll go and knock on doors. And you know what? It was actually great. I actually really liked it. And I have now knocked on hundreds of doors in this community to spread the word about Jess. So soon after I started canvassing for Jess, they said the next thing they really needed help with was that they wanted people to host house parties for Jess, to get out the word in my community, in my neighborhood, in Mann Township. So they asked if I'd be willing to host a party. I said, great, I'll have a party. And I did. It was fabulous. Then really soon after that, this all happened really fast. Soon after that, I was asked if I'd be willing to sign up as a leader, to be a co-captain of the Mann Township regional team, which means that I would agree to host canvasses out of my home twice a month. And I agreed to do that. That's easy. I can have people at my home. Over the last several months, I've had dozens and dozens of people come to my home. I have trained them on how to canvass. I have sent them out into my community. And those dozens of people have now knocked on hundreds and hundreds of doors. So I got a call on my phone this week asking if I'd be willing to come out onto this stage today and talk about how this has all happened. And I did immediately have a panic attack, but after the panic attack ended, I did say yes gladly, because how can you say no? Bernie Sanders is here. Volunteering for the Jess King campaign has been one of the most meaningful and exciting and rewarding experiences of my entire life. I've never felt more connected to my own personal values. I've never felt more connected to this community. And I've never felt so empowered before. I am powerful. We are powerful. Becoming a volunteer has given me more hope than ever that we are capable of creating a better world for ourselves and for our children if we're all willing to show up together and to say yes. Here's one really cool thing about every single one of you who's here today. You can already check number 1 off the list. You showed up. You're here. That's amazing. And I know many of the faces in this crowd, and I know you because you are also volunteers and you have already decided to join this movement. For any of you who haven't, I encourage you today to take the second step like I did. Say yes. Join this movement. Come out with us to spread the word about Jess. If there are enough of us working together to do this work, we can't lose. We won't lose. We will win. So hopefully when many of you got here today, you saw some really awesome and very dedicated people with clipboards with the Jess campaign, dedicated volunteers like myself, who asked you to put your contact information down for the Jess campaign. If you didn't do that before you came in, please find an awesome clipboarder before you leave. Shout out to the clipboarding team. Woo! Put your name on a clipboard. And the Jess campaign, they'll contact you. And when they contact you and they ask you if you want to become a volunteer, say yes. Say yes. You can't lose. Thank you so much. So it's my pleasure to introduce our next speaker. His name is Ismail Smith-Waddell. He is a member of Lancaster City's Council and a member of the Mayor's Commission to Combat Poverty. Welcome, Izzy.
Okay, so clipboarding is the new national pastime, huh? So, as you guys heard, I'm Ismail Smith-Waddell here from Lancaster City Council, and I get the privilege of representing 60,000 of the finest people you might ever have the fortune to meet. I'm happy to be here in front of you. I'm happy to be a part of Team Jess. I'm happy to believe in an America that is for all of us, and indeed, I'm just happy to be here as a black man in a public space as they try again and again to make it illegal. That's right. So when I got the call from Jess, I asked her kind of what she wanted me to talk about, and she said, start with why you ran. So I'll tell you a little bit about that because it ties neatly into why I'm here and so proud to be speaking before Jess King and to be speaking before Bernie Sanders. Woo! This is my city. There's 60,000 of us, and 16,000 of us live in poverty. 16,000 of us either can't get jobs, can't get the transportation to get those jobs, and when we do get those jobs, we're not sure if we have children, if anybody's going to be able to look after them. We're not sure if we've gotten out of prison and we've served our debt to society, that there's going to be anybody there to help us along while our county tries to privatize that service. They want to hand over our reentry programs to the nation's second largest private prison company. They have asked the Fox to run the hen house. So that's why I'm standing here, because progressive politics at every level offers us a pathway to correct these kinds of injustices. How many people here, or how many people do you know that can't make ends meet? That have to move from apartment to apartment? How many people are terrified of the next medical bill or the next electrical bill they're going to get in the mail? How many people are a woman or black or Latinx or trans and just terrified to walk down the street sometimes? How did it come to be that we could be terrified to walk down the streets in the greatest country on earth? How did that happen? And how many of us live where they have decided for the quote-unquote public good that they are going to cut a giant gash right across our land? When they've proven over and over that they can't keep them safe. Every week, a new one spills, dumping oil or gas into the earth or into the Susquehanna, which isn't important. That's just where we get our water from. Who exactly? How did this become the natural order? Who exactly told us that we should be fine with paying taxes, and then when we look up to get the services those taxes are supposed to provide, we find that they've been launched to cereal on the back of a missile? Because the only way we understand how to protect communities is at the back of a bullet. We don't understand that you can protect a person by planting a garden, by feeding the hungry, by building a safe home. And I know that you know this, but so far, we have killed more Syrians in this year than we have welcomed into our country, and that's not right. So I was born here in Lancaster. This is my favorite city on the planet. Yeah, that's right. But, you know, I get into a lot of statistics with my day job. And, you know, every year after year, median incomes have gone up in the city. So has the poverty rate. How did it become the natural order that some people are going to get richer and some people are just going to get poorer? How did it become the natural order that we would just accept that some people are going to line their pockets while other people struggle to make ends meet, and that this was okay, and that there's always money for a new building and there's always money for a new bomb, but there's not money to feed and clothe people. There's not money for affordable housing. There's not money so that every kid can go to school and have new textbooks. and feed themselves. These are basic things like healthcare, like food, like the air we breathe, like the water they can't drink in Flint, Michigan, and they cannot be sold away. So I want to make this personal as I wrap up. So 2 years ago, I was working for the Mayor's Commission to Combat Poverty. I was up at a podium, not unlike this one. I was giving my little intro spiel, and there was a woman in the crowd, probably right about where Tony is right now, who was just shaking. And I was like, oh, okay, I'm going to keep going, but you do that. And she was so rattled with anger, so apparently furious, that I just had to stop and listen to what she had to say. So I said, yes, ma'am. And she said, there's a hole in my roof. What are you going to do about it? She explained, she's a senior, she's a renter, lived check to check, and a month ago, a hole had come in through her roof. Now, her landlord didn't live in Lancaster City, didn't live in Lancaster County, and like so many other families in the Southeast, her wealth was being extracted to make someone somewhere else richer, which is the story of black and brown communities all over the country. She didn't own her home, so none of the credits or loan programs that go for homeowners to repair things like a busted-in roof were available for her. For her, there was nothing, or at least that's what I thought. And so I stood in front of that woman who had asked me a very direct question about how she could make her life better, and I said, I'll take your information, because that's all that I thought that I could do. And then I shrugged. It is 2018, Lancaster, America, and the time that we are going to shrug at injustice is over. We are done. No one is ever going to come to me again and say, I can't live my life, and I'm going to say, I don't know what to do for you. Because that is what we have standing here together. We have the power to correct these fundamental injustices. We can turn our rage and disappointment, our values and our vision into electoral power. By coming together like we are here today, we can move, we can organize, we can fight, we can protest, we can vote so mightily that we shake the earth underneath us and that no one, not even Lloyd Smucker, can ignore us. But that's okay. He's not going to have that problem much longer. Now, like I said, Jess asked me to talk a little bit about why I ran, and I feel like I've given you a pretty good intro. But at the time that I decided to run for city council, I was working in Jess King's office at Assets. So I have to say that a big part of why I deserve to run is that I was working with a woman who had made all kinds of sacrifices to put her money where her mouth was, who had decided that it was not enough to just let other people's charity try to solve our poverty problem, our housing problem. Jessica King lived her values, and she lived them in front of me so powerfully that I felt moved to run for office. And when I spoke to Jess King, wait for this, imagine a candidate who just listened. Who just heard what it was that I had to say, and then we could get together on working on how to do it. So the woman that I am about to introduce is a leader who understands that all of this is personal, and I could not be more proud to support her. This is a woman who understands that education for all our children is personal, that the struggles facing our poorest communities are personal, because she understands that my mother's cancer and the cost of her treatment and the union that protects her health insurance is personal. She understands that getting these damn pipelines out of our sacred soil is personal. Because this is our land. These are our streets. This is our America, and it is for all of us. Ladies and gentlemen, I have the greatest privilege of my life at this moment, and that is to introduce my mentor and friend, Jessica King.
Most of the last decade, so thank you for coming. We're so glad that you're here. So I want to tell you a little bit about me and how I ended up here in front of you. I am a daughter of this place. I was born and raised in Lancaster County. I think my roots go back here something like 12 generations. And so running for office in a place that has that level of depth and connection and relationship and family, it is real and it is personal and it is deeply felt. So an important part of my story was that when I was just shy of 2 years old, we lost my dad in a plane crash, leaving my mom a widow with 3 little kids. I was the youngest in the family, and as you might imagine, Social Security survivors benefits were one thing that were pretty essential to getting our family through that time. When I was about 5, my mom remarried my stepdad, who also had lost his wife and had a daughter. So we had a blended family. My mom's over here today. And neither of my parents had college degrees, but they had a strong work ethic. So they decided to start a small business in Leola on Main Street, a paint store and a painting contractor business that I started working in from the time I was 8 years old. And I learned so much. I learned about hard work. I learned about cash flow, money in, money out. I learned about family, sticking together through hard times, working things through at the dinner table. My family was also Mennonite. And so a big part of my experience from that tradition was that I know we're not just all in this, every person for ourselves, survival of the fittest, but that what I learned in that tradition was that other than loving God, our biggest responsibility is to love our neighbor as ourselves. Right? So these are the values, right? Life is short. Make it count. My dad died when he was 32. You don't know how much time you've got. You work hard and you love your neighbor. It's not that complicated. So I've been putting that to work here in Pennsylvania for my whole career. I've spent the last 2 decades working to fight for working families, for building economies and neighborhoods that work better for all of us, for affordable housing, for creating good jobs. Since 2010, when we moved back from Pittsburgh, I was there for a decade, moved back home 10 years ago when my husband, who's a Mennonite pastor, took a job here in Lancaster City pastoring a church. And since 2010, I've been the executive director of Assets, a nonprofit that does small business development with a real focus on working with women and men of color so that our economy starts to look a little bit more like our community, right? And we work with all businesses to create more good jobs, ensure that they pay workers a living wage, protect our land and water, and give back to the community that supports them. But despite the good work that my colleagues and I did, Lancaster, as Izzy just talked about, still has a poverty rate of about 30%, higher than Philadelphia or Pittsburgh. Poverty here has actually gone up 50% since the year 2000. What's that about, right? This isn't just an urban issue either. Our rural and suburban school districts have seen their poverty rates climb as well. Working families in this country have not seen a raise in a generation. Since 1980, about the same year my parents started their small business. Anybody remember what happened around 1980? We started rewriting the rules of our economy to favor Wall Street and the biggest corporations. We've had almost 40 years to see if these economic policies work, and guess what?
They don't work.
They don't work. For 40 years, wages have flatlined. Our economy's grown, we know this, but that growth has all gone to the very top. Right now, Americans, 3 Americans, own about as much wealth as the bottom 50%, right? And the top 10th of 1% owns as much as 90% of us. So is it a trickle down or is it a flood to the top? And when Congress doubled down on the tax bill, this is only going to make it worse. These stats are going to get worse. Listen. This isn't the picture of a sustainable economy or a sustainable society. And most terrifying, there is not one example of a democracy in the history of the world that is as unequal as ours that has survived. The very question of our democracy is at stake. So 80 years ago, Franklin Delano Roosevelt made the comment that people that are hungry and out of a job are the things of which dictatorships are made. I think our country needs to reckon with this warning again, now. In this new 11th district, speaking to the needs of working families has to be the central part of our campaign. We've got to build a movement that's big enough to hold all of us. We can't afford to lose more people to the cynicism and to politicians that divide us. So you remember that value I talked about earlier, working hard, right? I see people working their tails off every day. There is no shortage of hard work in this equation. I see teachers with growing class sizes and stagnant wages being teachers and parents and social workers and guidance counselors and stretching every dollar for our community. And I see our kids like Ashton finishing their homework and then planning walkouts and public forums and sit-ins in their congressman's office to fight for the simple right to feel safe at school. I see entrepreneurs, beautiful entrepreneurs and small business owners working so hard to create new jobs in this community and maybe not even taking that much home for themselves. Because business owners like my parents that hustle and hustle harder and harder competing with Home Depot and Amazon. I see the healthcare workers, doctors, and nurses protesting on their lunch breaks to save their patients' health care. I see our farmers working dawn till dusk in this beautiful agrarian community. Dairy farmers losing their milk contracts, potentially their farms, while Walmart builds a new dairy processing plant to have more control over and more profit in their supply chain. It's not right. I see my neighbors working on factory lines, second and third shifts, the families that stack shifts so that somebody's always home with their kids, but mom and dad never see each other. And I know every week that they feel more and more at risk of losing that job to a machine. I see the police officers, the first responders, and the probation officers who know the root causes of what's going on our streets and prisons, but they don't have enough resources or time to actually address them, especially to deal with addictions or mental health. And I see those that have put in their time and that are retired veterans and public servants and pensioners, counting on Medicare and Social Security to get through your days, but patching it together with odd jobs because it's just not enough. I see the organizers and the leaders in our community, like the awesome staffers on my team who made us the second political organization, the campaign in the country ever to unionize because we walk the talk. And I see our volunteers stepping up and saying yes because you know how much is at stake. This right here, right now, this moment, this political movement, this is about us. This is about envisioning a future for this country that actually works for all of us, not just the CEOs and the lobbyists. We are working hard, but things aren't always working for us. I know that I decided to put a lot of my life on hold and take the biggest risk of my life to stand in front of you and run for office because I know that when my neighbors are not well, I'm not well. Right? I know when 47% of our children in this beautiful city live below the poverty line, that my kids are not well. I know when the economic struggles in suburban and rural school districts all across this community grow, that we are not well. We're all in this together, folks. And you know what? I think we're here. I'm taking a guess that you're here because we've rejected a politics of fear and division and greed and scarcity that pits us. We've rejected a politics that pits neighbor, against neighbors who don't look like us or weren't born in the same place as us and say it's their fault. No, I think we're here because we know that we're better together. We're choosing to work for, to build, and to fight for an America that works for all of us. And I can't think of a better example of this than the fact that Lancaster County resettles 20 times the number of refugees than anywhere else in this country. Right? It's beautiful. I got a little reminder for my distant cousins, Chet Byler and Lloyd Smucker, because yeah, we're related. I think they forget that our Amish and Mennonite ancestors were religious refugees just a few hundred years ago. Right? I think we are all here because we know that our immigrant and refugee brothers and sisters make us better, and that we know that we can and we should build a longer table and not a higher wall. Folks, we have the opportunity right now and the political will right here to do politics differently, to stand for our values and fight for real solutions, to transcend party politics and connect around a vision of this country that includes all of us. What does that look like? I think when America works for all of us here in the richest country on the earth, that healthcare should be a right and not a privilege. When America works for all of us, we'll pass debt-free public college so that everyone has access to the education they need to succeed without tens of thousands of dollars in debt. When America works for all of us, every American who wants one will have access to a good job that pays enough to sustain their family and live a good life. I think when America works for all of us, we will invest in 100% renewable energy within a generation and the jobs that go with it. And nowhere is that more important than rural, agriculture-based economies. When America works for all of us, we're going to work with small businesses to raise the minimum wage because no one should live in poverty after working a full day's work. No one. And when America works for all of us, we'll support our neighbors who are struggling against the epidemic of opioid addictions and create a path to rehabilitation, not criminalization. When America works for all of us, we'll support Puerto Rico and resolving the debt crisis, rebuilding after Hurricane Maria, and probably most importantly, ensuring fair representation in our federal government. And I think when America works for all of us, we're going to tell the corporate lobbyists and the billionaire donors that politicians will not be bought and sold anymore. And I think you're going to be glad to hear a little bit about our campaign not taking a dime from corporate PACs or oil and gas executives. But you know what? Congressman Smucker is. And last quarter, only 3% of his contributions came from actual people. The rest were from corporate PACs and political PACs. But you know what else? We've raised more money than he has 2 quarters in a row. So this works. People ask how we're going to do this, how we're going to build an America that's going to work for all of us. And I'm going to remind you that we've been here before. 90 years ago, we were at almost the same levels of inequality that we are today. And then our economy imploded in the Great Depression. As the country rebuilt, our middle class did not happen by accident. Remember that. It didn't happen by accident. We chose to invest in people, in education, in home ownership, in innovation and jobs. My opponents talk about private enterprise and letting the markets work, but they forget that when our middle class is booming, it was because we wrote the rules of the economy to give everyone a fair shot. When the middle class was booming, organized labor was at its peak in this country, and we leveled the playing field between monopolies and small businesses. Let me just be clear, as somebody who spent most of my career working in small business, I have an MBA, the biggest competition to small business in this country isn't government regulation. It's the fact that half of Americans have not seen a raise in a generation, and if they did, they'd spend it and the economy would grow from the bottom up. So here's the thing, folks. When we have something to vote for, not just something to vote against, people show up. Thank you for showing up. And you know, too, that midterm elections are all about who shows up and who stays home. So we need to inspire more people to show up and turn out. This is why it's so important that we engage and train as many volunteers as possible so that we can scale this campaign up and have door-to-door and on-the-phone conversations with as many voters as possible before November. We need to get more people involved in the process, get more folks registered to vote, and keep winning over Republicans who are fed up with the status quo. And I'm going to tell you just a quick anecdote that everywhere we go, we talk to lifelong Republicans right here in Lancaster and York counties, yes we do, who have pledged us their vote because of their values. And you know what? We're starting to call it Rexit for Republican exit. This is how we do it. My friends, we believe we can win this election in November by running a bold and a beautiful campaign focused on issues that matter most to people in this district, by working hard to talk with voters in areas that have been forgotten, like Hanover and Red Lion and Southeast Lancaster City, Elizabethtown, and the southern end. And we need you to help us. To build an America for all of us, it's going to take all of us. We need your vote. We need you to pitch in to knock on doors, talk to your neighbors, or make a financial contribution. Hundreds of people have volunteered already. Thousands have donated. And to win in November, we got to keep scaling this up. So I know that right now is a bit of a dark moment in our nation's politics. the news coming out of Washington is rarely inspiring. And whenever I feel tempted to despair, I think about our hometown hero, Thaddeus Stevens, who lived and worked just a few blocks from here about 150 years ago. He was our representative to Congress from Lancaster County in the 1850s. At a time when slaveholders were expanding their reach and the Confederacy was just being born, Thaddeus Stevens defended runaway slaves and harbored people seeking freedom as part of the Underground Railroad. And he brought the cause of abolition to Congress and steadfastly defended the inherent equality of all people. Remembering his courage and his commitment keeps me grounded. And it reminds me that elected office should be about what's doing right in the face of powerful political and economic forces. Elected office should be about people. I'm also inspired by a current elected official who also focuses on doing what is right in the face of powerful economic and political interests. Someone who believes, too, that elected office should be about people. I've been inspired by his leadership for years, and 2 years ago, I had the pleasure of meeting Senator Bernie Sanders in his stop here in Lancaster County. And can I tell you, at that point, I had no idea that I would be standing in front of you running for office today, right? Some of you have no idea you're going to be running for office next year or the year after that, but you will, and we'll have your back. A year ago, I made the decision to run, recognizing that more of us who believe that politics should be about people need to step up and step up sooner than later because there's just so much at stake. And today, I stand with you knowing that we can make history this November. And now, I want to introduce to you a citizen who got involved in scrappy politics. Scrappy politics because he cared about his community and he knew they could do better. A citizen who's been consistent in his values in the decades since then. He went from the mayor of Burlington, Vermont to the House of Representatives to the Senate, and each step of the way he's been fighting for working families and for policies that work for all of us. Friends, we're honored to have him in Lancaster, Pennsylvania in the 11th Congressional District. Please welcome Senator Bernie Sanders.
Thank you. In case you haven't noticed, there are a lot of people here today. When we were discussing where to go in Pennsylvania, where to campaign, we were told that Jess King was a great candidate. Jess King had done a lot for small business in the area. Jess had grown up and worked here her entire life, but we were told that, as a result of redistricting here in Pennsylvania, that this district had become more Republican and Jess really didn't have a good chance to win. Well, let me tell you, from up here looking at you, not only can she win, she is going to be your next congressman.
This is my 7th time seeing Bernie. I am so fortunate.
I talk a lot about what the political revolution means, and it means to me two things. It means having great candidates like Jess, who have the courage to run for office, and in this case, this is Jess's first time running for office. And running for office on a progressive agenda, and you just heard her progressive agenda.
Mark, I'm actually having her on. She's going to be a guest.
Revolution, which is equally important or even more important is to transform American politics by involving millions of people all over this country. All of you know who have ever studied American history that real change, and God knows we need real change right now. Real change has never taken place from the top on down. It's always from the bottom up. So we need Jess in Congress, but as she just mentioned we need you out there knocking on doors, doing social media, making the phone calls that will elect her as the next congressperson from the 11th District. Right-wing Republicans win as they did in 2014 when billionaires make huge campaign contributions and working people stay at home. We win when people stand up, fight back, get involved, and vote. And that's what this campaign is all about. It's about Jess's progressive agenda, but it's about revitalizing American democracy. It's about working people standing up and saying loudly and clearly, we need a government that represents all of us, not the billionaire class and a handful of campaign contributors. And if you guys get involved in Jess's campaign and you make a $10 contribution or a $20 contribution, I have zero doubt that she's going to win. Now, let me tell you why we need Jess in the United States Congress. We need Jess because her vision of America is a very
Josephine, you're gonna have to deal. People
than
moved in my
Republican
spot.
leadership and Donald Trump, who now control our government. Jess understands that the beauty of our country, what makes this country unique and what makes our country great, is that over the years we have brought our people together, black and white and Latino, Native American, Asian American, gay and straight, women and men. And Jess understands the history of America and all of the bigotry and all of the discrimination that has gone before. And what Jess will bring to the United States Congress is a vision which tells Donald Trump and his friends, you will not divide us up. We're coming together as one people.
Yes, Ellen, it is 75 and sunny.
And Jess also understands that we need an agenda in Congress that in a time of massive income and wealth inequality, where the very, very rich are getting richer, and where people here in Pennsylvania and Vermont are working 2 or 3 jobs to keep their heads above water, we need an agenda that speaks to the needs of working families, not the people on top. Just understands the absurdity, the vulgarity of a Trump budget that would have cut Medicaid by $1 trillion. That would have cut Medicare by $500 billion over 10 years. That while Trump and his friends were giving tax breaks to billionaires, that budget would have cut nutrition programs for low-income pregnant women. Jess understands that at a time when so many people in Lancaster County, in Vermont, and all over this country are working so hard to put food on the table for their kids, that nobody in America who works 40 hours a week should be living in poverty.
Just so you guys know, I am not zoomed in. I'm literally that close.
Work with me to understand that the current $7.25 an hour minimum wage federally and in Pennsylvania is a starvation wage. That we are going to raise that minimum wage to $15 an hour. And just understand that it is unfair, it is wrong for women in America to be making 80 cents on the dollar compared to men. We're going to have equal pay for equal work. And by the way, Jess understands that when it comes to controlling a woman's body, that is the woman's decision, not the government.
Oh my God.
Now, Donald Trump and his friends, they had a brilliant plan, which including repeal of the Affordable Care Act and throwing up to 32 million Americans off of the health care they currently have. Can you imagine anybody thinking about throwing millions of people off of health insurance they currently enjoy? Well, Jess and I and most of you have a very different idea when it comes to health care. We think that there is something wrong when the United States of America, our great country, is the only major country on earth not to guarantee health care to all people as a right.
Not us.
And that is why when Jess gets to Congress, she's not going to be in the business of throwing people off of health care. She's going to be in the business of supporting a Medicare for all single-payer program.
Yes, please.
And Jess understands that we desperately need good-paying jobs in America, and at a time when our infrastructure is collapsing, our roads, our bridges, our water systems, our wastewater plants, our airports, our tunnels, we can put up to 15 million Americans back to work at good-paying jobs. Jess is on board.
Woo! Federal job guarantee, guys.
Jess understands a very profound point, that this great nation will not survive economically in a competitive global economy unless we have the best educated workforce in the world.
Yes.
And Jess understands how unfair it is to working families all across this country when we have bright young people who have the ability, who have the desire to get a higher education, but they can't do that because their families lack the funds. And that is why Jess is going to work with me to make public colleges and public universities tuition free. Jess understands that kids in America, especially from lower income and working class families, do not do well in school unless they have high quality pre-K child care education.
Yes.
That is why Jess and I are going to work together to make sure that every little kid in this country and every parent who wants to send their kid to a pre-K program can afford to do that in a high-quality program. Jess understands that a great nation is not judged by the number of nuclear weapons it has or by the number of billionaires it has. It is judged by a very different criteria. It is judged by its compassion. It is judged by how it addresses the problems facing the most vulnerable people in this country. Now, Paul Ryan, you have heard of Paul Ryan. Paul Ryan and his friends, the Koch brothers. You've heard of the Koch brothers?
Yeah, they endorsed Hillary.
Now, what these guys want to do is, after giving huge tax breaks to billionaires, $1 trillion in tax breaks over 10 years to the top 1%, after increasing military spending by $165 billion over a 2-year period, their next brilliant idea, after they run up the deficit, is to try to cut Social Security, Medicare, Medicaid, and education. Now, Jess knows that in Lancaster and in Burlington, Vermont, and all over this country, we have senior citizens who are trying to get by, and I don't know how they do it, on $11,000, $12,000 a year Social Security. So Jess and I not only will oppose any efforts to cut Social Security, we're going to expand Social Security benefits. And by the way, we're going to take on the pharmaceutical industry.
Yes!
Where last year, the 5 largest drug companies made $50 billion in profit, and yet all across this country, people cannot afford the medicine they desperately need. Jess and I are going to change that. Jess knows that there is something profoundly wrong in this country when we have sick and crazed people walking into schools, shooting down children and teachers. And that is why we are going to do what the American people want, irregardless of what the NRA believes. And we are going to pass common sense gun safety legislation. And Jess also knows that in our great country there is something very wrong when we have more people in jail, over 2 million Americans in jail, more than any other country on earth, including communist China. And that is why the time is now for real criminal justice reform.
Yes! Finally, someone speaks about it. He's the only
Our
one.
job together is to invest in our kids so they have good education, good schools, good job training. Invest in the children, not in jails and incarceration. And we're going to work together on one of the great moral issues of our time, and that is the need for real, comprehensive immigration reform. And unlike the President of the United States,
that's you! The people's president!
Understands that climate change is not a hoax, but it is a dangerous reality impacting the entire planet. And that is why we're going to work together, Trump and Scott Pruitt notwithstanding, to transform our energy system away from fossil fuel to energy efficiency and sustainable energies like wind and solar. Brothers and sisters, I think all of you know, we are at a pivotal moment in American history, and to a large degree, what happens here in Pennsylvania and all over the country in the next election will determine the future not only for ourselves, but more importantly for our children and our grandchildren. And what Jess understands, what you understand, and what I understand, is that we are the wealthiest country in the history of the world. There is no excuse for 40 million people living in poverty. There is no excuse for an economy where the rich get much richer while millions of working families see a decline in their standard of living. And what Jess knows, and what I know, and what you know, is that what Trump and the Republican leadership is doing on issue after issue after issue is exactly the opposite of what the American people want. The American people want billionaires and large corporations to start paying their fair share of taxes, not get huge tax breaks. The American people want to raise the minimum wage to a living wage, not ignore the problems of low-income workers. On issue after issue, despite what the media may tell you, the American people are united about creating an economy that works for all of us and not just the few. The problem that we have now is that we have a Congress and a White House who are dominated by people who are working for powerful special interests. And what the political revolution is about, and what Jess is about, is to say to those people, we have had enough of your greed and your selfishness. We're going to overturn this disastrous Citizens United Supreme Court decision and move toward a political system of one person, one vote.
Yes!
We're going to elect people to Congress to give us an economy that works for workers, not just billionaires. Brothers and sisters, this district could be the pivotal district in terms of 2018. If Jess wins here, we're going to win all over America. So for the sake of our kids and our grandchildren, let's get to work. Let's elect Jess King as the next congressperson from the 11th district. Thank you all very much.
Young old man. The sky comes falling down for you. There's nothing in this world we do.
Hey, Jess.
Jess,
Come on in.
I have a tattoo for you, Bernie. Jess.
Yay, I got to shake his hand again. I'm excited. Actually, last time I got a hug and a kiss. I'm still very excited. Fucking hero, you guys. How many people get to see their heroes 7 fucking times? So you guys saw, Bernie's badass as usual. He's the only one who fights for us. He's the only one who... Oh, you okay? He's the only one who constantly fights for us on Congress floor and Senate and everything like that. He can change our world, and he already has in so many ways. He's inspired millions, and he's gotten thousands of people to run for local offices. I can't say enough about him. I'm trying not to cry because I just shook his hand again. So it's important. 2018 is important. You guys hear me say it all the time. We need to, if we want Bernie 2020, we got to get the right people in 2018 to get Bernie 2020. It's not just going to happen. The assholes in there now, they don't want Bernie. Let's get Bernie-crats elected. Let's get Bernie elected, and we can start changing our world for the better. As always, thank you so much for watching. Again, just like always, shows Monday, Wednesday, Friday, 9 p.m. Eastern. Monday, I have a Pennsylvanian candidate, Kareem Cadil. I don't even know what to say. Oh my God. It's just, I feel so fortunate. It's pretty incredible to have this opportunity 7 times. So thank you guys for watching. Thank you guys for supporting the revolution, and thank you guys for staying true to what's important. So again, take care, much love. I will see you on Monday night.